Job's childlike judgment of God had never been vitiated and perverted to the dishonoring of the great Father by any taint of such low theories as, alas, we must call the popular. Explanations of God's ways by such as did not understand him. They are acceptable to such as do not care to know him, such as are content to stand afar off and stare at the cloud whence issue the thunders and the voices. But a burden threatening to sink them to Tophet, a burden grievous to be borne to such as would arise and go to the Father. The contradiction between Job's idea of the justice of God and the things which had befallen him is constantly haunting him. It has a sting in it far worse than all the other misery with which he is tormented. But it is not fixed in the hopelessness of hell by an accepted explanation more frightful than itself. Let the world Sphinx put as many riddles as she will. She can devour no man while he waits an answer from the world Redeemer. Job refused the explanation of his friends because he knew it false. To have accepted such as would by many in the present day be given him would have been to be devoured at once of the monster. He simply holds on to the skirt of God's garment, besieges his door, keeps putting his questions again and again, ever haunting the one source of true answer and reconciliation. No answer will do for him but the answer that God only can give. For who but God can justify God's ways to his creature? From a soul whose very consciousness is contradiction, we must not look for logic. Misery is rarely logical. It is itself a discord. Yet is it nothing less than natural that, feeling as if God wronged him, Job should yet be ever yearning after a sight of God, straining into his presence, longing to stand face to face with him. He would confront the One. He is convinced, or at least cherishes as his one hope, the idea that if he could but get God to listen to him, if he might but lay his case clear before him, God would not fail to see how the thing was, and would explain the matter to him, would certainly give him peace. The man in the ashes would know that the foundations of the world yet stand sure, that God has not closed his eyes, or, horror of all horrors, cease to be just. Therefore would he order his words before him, and hear what God had to say. Surely the just would set the mind of his justice-loving creature at rest. His friends, good men, religious men, but of the Pharisaic type, that is, men who would pay their court to God instead of coming into his presence as children, men with traditional theories, which have served their poor turn, satisfied their feeble intellectual demands, they think others therefore must accept or perish. Men anxious to appease God rather than trust in him. Men who would rather receive salvation from God than God their salvation. These his friends would persuade Job to the confession that he was a hypocrite, insisting that such things could not have come upon him but because of wickedness. As if they knew of none open, it must be for some secret vileness. They grow angry with him when he refuses to be persuaded against his knowledge of himself. They insist on his hypocrisy, he on his righteousness. Nor may we forget that herein lies not any overweening on the part of Job, for the poem prepares us for the right understanding of the man by telling us in the prologue that God said thus to the accuser of men, "Hast thou considered my servant Job, that there is none like him in the earth, a perfect and an upright man, one that feareth God and escheweth evil?" God gives Job into Satan's hand with confidence in the result, and at the end of the trial approves of what God said concerning himself. But the very appearance of God is enough to make Job turn against himself. Job's part was to have trusted God altogether, in spite of every appearance, in spite of every reality. Job will justify himself no more. He sees that though God has not been punishing him for his sins, yet is he far from what he ought to be and must become. Behold, he says, I am vile. What shall I answer thee? I will lay mine hand upon my mouth.